Contrary, the show that digs deeper than everything else out there to find unique angles to exploit for fantasy football, hopefully for profit and emotional gains. I'm Chris Spags. Today, I'm joined by the top DFS player in the world, the namesake of this website, Alex Baker, better known to you guys as Osmo. How are you doing, Alex?
Doing great. I got a lot of hot takes all queued up, ready to go. So let's do it.
They're in the holster like Red Dead Redemption. It's a very topical reference right now. There's ready to fire on our faces at any minute. Speaking of, we got another guy. I guess not speaking of. I don't know why you'd be related to a cowboy video game, Evan. But back today for the Roto World Senior Editor's matchups column you should be reading if you want to get better and to know anything about football, whether you're playing DFS or not. Evan Silva coming live from a McDonald's. How are you doing, Evan?
I do not need to be within any miles of any McDonald's for the rest of the football season. But yeah, this is where I'm located today, and hopefully my audio is all right. But I'm excited to be back. Sorry for missing last week. Just some family issues came up, but I'm ready to talk some football with Spags and Osimo.
Hey, life happens. Now we get it. We're just glad to have you here, and we're glad. Hopefully, Grimace doesn't wander into the background at some point and distract you. That's what I'm worried about. Or Ronald McDonald, I guess, depending upon the esoteric McDonald reference you want to have. Oops, there we go. All right, cool. Let's talk about the first. Actually, before we talk about the slate, let's get a promo code out there. Promo code Contrary on Osmo.com. We'll get you all of our ownership projections, rankings from Osmo himself, articles as well from Osmo, which have been really good across a variety of sports. This NBA one called the Chalk Outline is my favorite article we have on the site right now. Very cleverly named, Alex. But go use that promo code Contrary. You can get any of our packages for 1 week free. Check it out now. But Evan, I want to talk to you. One of your popular punching bags. We didn't get to hear this last week. Hugh Jackson gone. How does this affect your life? Do you miss him? Like, is it one of those things where it's like a stabbing pain that you just don't have anymore?
I mean, the animosity built up just because like he got to keep his job, and the guy who was actually doing a decent job, Sashi Brown, did not. You know, he got fired. You know, that's really where it started, and it's just like it shows like all the things that are wrong with the NFL. Like, you know, the terrible ownership in Cleveland, you know, the terrible decision making. You can look at like the history of the owner. Like all Tennessee fans hate this owner because, you know, he ruined the Tennessee football program. You know, he was investigated by the FBI for ripping off like truckers, like, you know, hardworking everyday Americans, and, you know, and he's the guy making these decisions, you know, and that's one of the ways that he got rich, you know, and he's got like a brother who's like like the governor of Tennessee or something. And, you know, and Hugh Jackson, just because he's a better salesman than Sashi Brown, you know, they kept him, and, you know, the non-virtuous owner kept the non-virtuous coach. And, you know, it was, you know, many months too late, but, you know, finally, you know, there was some redemption there. And, you know, I don't really want to see anybody get fired. You know, I really don't. But I just think that, you know, especially that on that day, it was Halloween last year when they decided to fire Hugh Jackson, or they decided to keep Hugh Jackson because he wanted to trade a second and a third round pick for AJ McCarron. And Sashi Brown, you know, laid down in front of the tank and took one for the team and was like, you know, we are not doing this trade. And then he wound up getting fired for being the smarter decision maker. You know, that's just that I think it's awful, you know. And but yeah, I mean, we've moved on now. Freddie Kitchens, I thought, did a good job in his first game as the Browns play caller. He got the ball to Duke Johnson. And, you know, they did some things that made life a little bit easier on their rookie quarterback. So hopefully we'll continue to see the Browns ascend going forward.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I was excited by Freddie Kitchens' first game, and I want to talk Cleveland a little bit later, but that's obviously not going to be the most pertinent game on the slate, so we'll try to hit that first. There really isn't an equivalent of Rams-Saints on this week's slate. The ownership overall is way more spread out. Again, our projections on Osmo.com, promo code Contrary. It's a lot more spread out than I would have thought, but there's no obvious game here. So let's talk about the Saints again heading into Cincinnati. What are the prospects, Evan, of this offense for you without A.J. Green?
Yeah, I mean, it just sets up like, you know, if you're going to do like just a target projection for Tyler Boyd, I mean, it's got to be as high as any receiver on the slate. Add to that the fact that the Saints are just getting killed in the slot, and he, you know, runs a heavy majority of his routes on the interior. I mean, you know, they got nothing on the outside. I mean, they're going to trot out probably Alex Erickson, who really should be a slot receiver, and John Ross, who's been just a complete bust, just really has shown nothing except for the inability to stay healthy since being drafted. Tight end, they got CJ Uzoma, who's been playing through a shoulder injury, had 0 catches on 4 targets in their last game. So it's just, in terms of a target projection, it should be really high for Tyler Boyd. At the same time, his price is so high, like I find it very hard to justify in my brain paying a top 5 wide receiver price in DFS for Tyler Boyd. And I really like Tyler Boyd. He's been a great story this year. 3rd-year breakout receiver. Really didn't show very much in his first 2 NFL seasons. Actually took a step back last year. But I would like to get Osimo's take. We need to talk about ownership projection and, is he worth it at that price?
What do you think, Alex? I know your rankings were pretty high on Boyd or relative to his price. What do you think?
Before I really get going here, I want to do some touting. You don't have hair on your balls if you don't click that like button. And also click the bell while you're at it so you can make sure that you get notified on your computer when we're going live. Anyways.
That was a strong one. You really came out hard, insulting people's manhood. I respect that.
I feel passionately about getting those likes. I mean, whenever you pull a high volume guy like AJ Green that leaves a lot of targets for the rest of the team, as Eric mentioned, Boyd is going to be the recipient of a lot of those targets. And I think that's the main thing I'm looking at. I don't think it makes like a huge difference in efficiency. Maybe like a marginal 5 to 10% for the team or something like that. But when you get the more targets, that makes a bigger difference. So I'm looking at Boyd as one of the better plays this week. And on the other side, I'm also liking Michael Thomas. So I think that this could be a really good game to stack up the passing attack on both teams.
Yeah, I agree there. And I think Boyd, people are going to be a little scared off by the price. Our ownership isn't crazy high on him right now for DraftKings. We have him under 13%. And I think a lot of that is just people being spooked off. And I was a little worried about a similar situation in Detroit where we took out Golden Tate. And last week, we kind of saw how that affected the prospects for Galladay and Jones slightly, a little more Galladay, where just there's more easily focused attention, I guess. But I think with the Saints, it's not going to be an issue. They've been bad against the slot all year. And Boyd has been a really good safety blanket for Dalton. So I actually like Boyd a lot. What do you think, Evan, about Michael Thomas following up that big game? He's going to be one of the highest projected owned players on the slate. Evan?
Yeah, I just did something real dumb. I was like, because Osimo kind of scared me with this threat there, and I tried to click on the YouTube thing to do a like, and then I was listening to you guys and listening to the YouTube thing. What was the question? Sorry.
Michael Thomas is going to be one of the highest owned guys on the slate, coming off that monster game versus the Rams. Are you comfortable chasing him back there again with this matchup in Cincinnati?
He seems like someone that I think that is a good fade this week. Fade the recency bias, and I think that the more people that I've talked to, and now you mentioned that lowered ownership projection for Tyler Boyd, like the way that I have been thinking about Tyler Boyd, that's probably the way that the public is viewing Tyler Boyd. That, just at the end of the day, I can't click Tyler Boyd's name because, I don't really associate him with being a dude who's priced at a top 5 level among wide receivers. And it's like probably most people are going to think that same way. So maybe I need to rethink my own stance. But, yeah, Michael Thomas, I mean, look, he's an awesome player, and he's got a really good matchup. I mean, Bengals have not been intimidating whatsoever from any defensive standpoint, really have struggled to rush the passer, lost one of their best pass rushers before the bye to a torn ACL, Carl Lawson. They're without their slot corner. Michael Thomas gets a ton of his production in the slot. He actually lines up outside most of the time, but when he's in the slot, Drew Brees targets him at just an incredible clip. Like last week, he ran about 80% of his routes on the outside, but then he got half of his targets on the inside, and he got like over half of his production on the inside. So like when he moves inside, Brees is throwing him the ball. and the Bengals are without their slot corner. So, look, he's a really good play, no question, and he should have a good game. But their passing game is not as good on the road historically. And, just coming off that monster game, I think that people are going to be chasing points a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think there might be a similar argument for another guy here with Alvin Kamara. Obviously, I think there's a little more to back. Well, not a little more to back that. That's unfair. But Kamara has been interesting. 23 touches last week, 19 plus touches over the last 3 weeks. And that's despite Mark Ingram being back in the lineup. Evan, how do you feel with Ingram, I guess, overall, before we talk about the DFS perspective with Alex? Is Ingram just being phased out of the role, or is he going to have a week where he's back and all of a sudden he gets 15 touches and 2 touchdowns?
Yeah, I mean, this trend of him being kind of scaled back has been going on since last season. That's one of the reasons that I was down on him in season long, was because over the final 5 games last year, Alvin Kamara out-touched Mark Ingram 7-1 inside the 10-yard line. And we did see that one game where Mark Ingram, it was right before the Saints bye week. They were playing the Redskins on Monday night. They really controlled the game. They pretty much could do whatever they wanted to do in that particular game. And Mark Ingram scored 2 touchdowns. And they kind of like scaled back Alvin Kamara. They'd been giving him, 23 touches a game in the first 4 and didn't need to do that against the Redskins, and Mark Ingram was like kind of shaking off the rust, and, they had the bye coming up. So it was kind of like they could ease off the pedal with Alvin Kamara a little bit in that situation. They come back from the bye, and it's right back to what it was down the stretch last year. Alvin Kamara has 8 touches inside the 10. Mark Ingram has 3. Alvin Kamara has 5 touchdowns since the bye week. Mark Ingram has none. Mark Ingram has 3 touchdowns over his last 8 games. He's averaging 53.3 points per game, or yards per game, during that stretch. Alvin Kamara out-touched him 23-10 last week, and Mark Ingram lost a fumble. Okay, so I mean, there are a lot of red flags here for Mark Ingram. Now, he's really cheap on DraftKings, on DraftKings. So that's definitely a part of our evaluation. But I mean, I think that they want Alvin Kamara to be like the clear feature back, and that fumble worries me because Sean Payton has not been cool with Mark Ingram in the past when he has fumbled.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Alex, how are you viewing this backfield situation? Is there any equity in going to Ingram this week?
Yeah, I definitely think that Ingram versus Kamara isn't as clear as our ownership is suggesting that the public believes it is. Last week, Ingram played 34 snaps. Kamara played 41 snaps. So they almost got an even amount of snaps. Kamara got a few more, and that was out of 71 total. And I think that it might have just been a little bit of variance that Kamara got 19 runs and Ingram got 9. So I think Ingram's price per snap is probably the highest of any player on the slate. And for that reason, I'm a little bit cautious to go to him.
That's an interesting metric there. Yeah, I think it's hard because I was on Ingram last week and I thought it was kind of logical with a lot of ownership of Kamara given his cheap price on DraftKings. And Ingram just did nothing. And I mean, the snap count I think is an interesting thing to look at, but he just wasn't involved and there wasn't a focus to get him the ball like it was Kamara. So it does worry me playing Ingram, but as that price is down, he's $4,300 less on DraftKings than Kamara. And if things swing his way, or, Kamara gets banged up and they don't need him out there versus Cincinnati, giving up 450 yards a game anyway, it could be an Ingram day, but it's scary going to Ingram. Let's talk about another game where the highest total on the board for one team here, Arizona heading into Kansas City. Sammy Watkins is questionable, and there is a chance of some shadow coverage, I guess, with Patrick Peterson, though he hasn't done it a lot this year. Evan, what do you think about the matchup for Tyreek Hill going against Peterson?
Yeah, Tyreek Hill has caught 48% of his passes in the slot this season, and Patrick Peterson has played in the slot 4 snaps all year. Mm-hmm. So, look, I mean, I think that Tyreek Hill could be limited when he's outside a little bit, and Patrick Peterson, it would make sense for him to go chase Tyreek Hill, but Tyreek Hill can still have a big game. Like, with Tyreek Hill is one of these dudes that, like, all it takes is like 1 or 2 plays, for him to really crush. And shoot, he's so quick that, like, he could absolutely catch a slant and go to the house against directly in Patrick Peterson's coverage. That we actually saw that in the Cardinals' last game against Marquise Goodwin. Only catches one pass all game, and it's a slant lined up against Patrick Peterson, and he goes to the house 55 yards for a touchdown. Now, we have higher expectations certainly for Tyreek Hill than we do for Marquise Goodwin. That actually is a good week for Marquise Goodwin to get 11 points out of him or whatever. We want more than that from Tyreek Hill, but with all the slot snaps that he takes, I think he's still going to get 6, 7, 8 catches. Sammy Watkins, Dr. Chow at Pro Football Doc on Twitter. Yeah, he's really good. He worked for the Chargers for a really long time. And he's been very good with injury predictions in terms of when guys are going to play or not play. He doesn't think that Sammy Watkins is going to play, despite the fact that Sammy Watkins returned to practice on Friday on a limited basis. And it kind of makes sense because the Rams or the Chiefs should be able to win this game pretty handily, regardless of Sammy Watkins' availability. And then next week they play the Rams. They're going to need all hands on deck, and then they have a bye after that. So if they're going to be a forward-thinking team, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to kind of, ease back on Sammy Watkins this week.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too. And we currently have Sammy Watkins for negligible ownership with this questionable tag anyway. Alex, what do you think about the offense situation for Kansas City overall? We have a lot of ownership on Patrick Mahomes, a lot of ownership on Kareem Hunt, less on Kelsey and Hill, but more ownership for Hill relative to Kelsey, which surprises me a little bit. What do you think about that side, Alex?
I think there's a lot of potential, and the team total of 33 shows that. But I'm having trouble figuring out exactly who I'd want to roster from Kansas City because the prices are pretty high. If Watkins is out, that will make a big difference. So that would make me more inclined to go to a guy like Kelsey or Hill because I think the replacement for Watkins isn't going to get as much of a target share. Mm-hmm. But one of the strategies I like in this game is going to Arizona players, although the offense has been pretty bad this year. Kansas City gives up pretty good yardage to opposing teams. Mm-hmm. And I think that the prices are right with David Johnson. These are kind of contrarian plays, perfect for this show. Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, I think those guys could all have a pretty good game. And then one of my favorite 3K punts of the week is J.J. Nelson. Chad Williams is out this week, and I'm expecting J.J. Nelson to replace him. And he hasn't seen a ton of snaps, but he's been targeted a decent amount on the ones he has. So I think for 3K, the price could be right there.
I want to hear Evan's thoughts on the Cardinals after I just give this real brief spiel. I'm so happy you said the Cardinals because I know it's a really low team total. I know it's Arizona and people don't doubt them. I was buying all in Arizona in that matchup with the Niners, and they kind of came through mostly because at the end of the game, they figured it out and seemed like they were opening things up a little bit. But David Johnson getting snaps out of the slot, getting outside more, I think he ran his most routes he's ran all year. Last time out. Also, Rosen looked confident enough. He had some really bad drives. He's a rookie. He's not going to be great, but he put up 20 points, I think, off the top of my head. I think that's where I don't mind Rosen at all. I'm intrigued by this Arizona team again, and I like that you said Nelson too. I think it's an interesting play. It's an interesting matchup all around. Evan, am I and Alex, I'll put Alex in the boat with me. Are we too enthusiastic about Arizona this week?
No, I really, and I think it could be a little ugly early in the game, but I think it could be a game where they eventually get theirs. Again, the Chiefs have a really big game coming up next week. It's actually in Mexico at altitude. It's actually even more altitude than Denver. So, they're going to want their dudes to be, in optimal condition if they can. And then they're getting back Justin Houston. Their pass rush has been good. I think their pass rush can win against the Cardinals' offensive line. So I think it could be ugly early in the game. And I actually like the Chiefs' defense a lot as well. But I think that the Cardinals can eventually get it rolling. And with David Johnson, I really like his price. I mean, first of all, the Chiefs have given up, even though they get so many leads. they've given up the most fantasy points in the NFL to running backs. They've given up the most receiving yards in the NFL to running backs. They've given up, the highest yards per carry in the NFL to running backs. And David Johnson, in that first game where Byron Leftwich calling plays, 20 touches, like you said, he matched his season high for routes run. And, the Chiefs are a team where, I think that if they get out to like a 24-point lead in the fourth quarter, like we saw on Thursday night with Carolina against Pittsburgh, which I think the lead was even more than that, but the Steelers pulled their starters. We could get like a half of a quarter, maybe, it's in play. It's not likely, but it's in play that we could get like a half of a quarter of like the Cardinals playing against the Chiefs backups. And I like that you brought up J.J. Nelson because this dude runs 4.27, and the Chiefs have been giving up a ton of long passing plays, more than anyone else. And this is a guy who it definitely only takes one play for him to hit value. He should be like at the minimum everywhere. And then I think Larry Fitzgerald's a cash game play. Game flow just sets up perfectly for him to get another double-digit target game. He had 12 targets in that first game, and the Chiefs have actually been pretty good against slot receivers. But Larry Fitzgerald had half of his targets on the outside, so I like to see that they're moving him around more. They're moving him around, and they're just trying to get the ball to their best players. And that it's just logical coaching. And then Byron Leftwich had the off week to kind of get guys healthy, number one, and then sift through any other issues offensively and any tweaks that he. I think they come out and play relatively well at the end of the day, and I think that we could get 20 points out of them as a team. And for all their prices, I mean, they're just so cheap. Everybody's so cheap that I definitely think that adjusted for cost, they're in a very good spot against Kansas City.
Yeah, the Kansas City defense at home worries me a little. They've definitely risen to the occasion a little more there. And it does make them more viable from a fantasy perspective, rather. Josh Rosen does throw it up, and he's been picked about as much as anybody on the slate. So there is some concern there. And I wouldn't go crazy on Josh Rosen, even though I'm stupid about him, despite being a USC guy. I love the UCLA kid. But it worries me a little bit about Rosen overall. But I think it's a great spot, and there's going to be some fantasy value here that people are sleeping on. And like Alex and Evan both mentioned, there's a lot of cheap guys here to have some exposure to.
Chris, just one question before we move on. Have you been scouting Byron Leftwich's smile recently?
He was happy when they beat San Francisco. Looked real great.
Did you adjust him up in your model?
I did. I actually, I'm not gonna lie. I looked up Freddie Kitchens because I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't remember. Not a great smile on Freddie Kitchens. I like Freddie Kitchens though. He's not the dude, not bringing joy to my heart like Byron Leftwich does. The irony, if you Google image search Byron Leftwich, a lot is him looking sad and injured, which I also learned firsthand. Let's talk about one more game, which has some shootout potential before we ask Alex for some contrarian under the radar spots. Atlanta and Cleveland, two teams giving up over 410 yards per game. So a lot of offense there. Atlanta went into Washington last week and beat up, I think, a pretty paper tiger Washington defense who looked good versus bad teams, but Atlanta just smoked them in every possible facet of that game. And Cleveland, again, Freddie Kitchens looking good as offensive coordinator since taking over for the entire coaching staff on there, getting forced out. I like this matchup. It's intriguing to me. What do you think about it, Alex?
I think the potential is there for them to have another huge week. The prices are pretty good. I have Julio Jones as a B value on DraftKings and FanDuel. Tevin Coleman, he's a little more popular than I'd like, but he's got a good price tag, and Austin Hooper as well. So I think that you can definitely go back to Atlanta. And then on the other side, I'm seeing a pretty average group of guys, but Jarvis Landry is standing out as a good value on DraftKings.
Yeah, I'm with you on Landry. What do you think about this one for both sides, Evan?
Yeah. Were you guys on Tevin Coleman at all last week?
I wasn't. I was on Julio, but not Tevin.
Okay,
Tevin Coleman
nice.
looked great though.
Okay. Yeah, he looked awesome. Throughout Steve Sarkisian's tenure, they had not thrown to the running backs at all. And that has been one of the most disappointing things that, of the Steve Sarkisian tenure. I don't think it's the people always talk about the red zone stuff. like how they struggle in the red zone, which they've actually figured out. But a lot of that is just variance, I think. Just first of all, it's a really small sample size of plays in the red zone. There was at one point there was this narrative that Marcus Mariota, he could not be stopped in the red zone. And then all of a sudden, the next season he's like the worst quarterback in the NFL in the red zone. It's just like that. But they finally started getting some positive variance in the red zone, and now they have since like week 2 they have like the best red zone offense in the NFL, and but the usage of the running backs in the passing game has been really disappointing. But all of a sudden, coming out of their bye, Tevin Coleman gets 7 targets. That's the most that he's ever had in a game with Steve Sarkisian, and they're awesome targets, like arrow routes to the onto the edge. And just you let him use his speed, and he races by a linebacker, and so I really liked everything that I saw from the offense coming out of that bye, and it seems like they're just kind of he's starting to figure things out. Against Cleveland, Cleveland is in really bad shape. They're on pace to play the most defensive snaps of any team since 1999. The 1999 Browns, which is an expansion team. And that's skewed because they played 4 games into overtime. Okay. But, and they're probably not going to finish at what the 1999 Browns did, but it goes to show that they're breaking down. And they keep losing dudes every week to injury. Denzel Ward couldn't, make it through the game last week. Christian Kirksey got placed on injured reserve, every down linebacker. They lost another dude to injury reserve. His name escapes me at this point. But they're breaking down as a defense, and we're starting to see that because they played well defensively early in the season, but at this point they're defense to attack. And Greg Williams is terrible. Their defensive coordinator's awful. It's just he blitzes at this crazy high rate, and you could just crush him with screens. You just screen pass him all day long. Like Steve Sarkisian, please just throw screens to Tevin Coleman, Ito Smith all day long. That's how Kareem Hunt scored his touchdown against them last week, 50-yard screen pass to the crib. So, I think that the Falcons have a good day offensively. I think that the Browns can too. They in Freddie Kitchens' first game, they really dropped Antonio Callaway's playing time. His playing time went down to 52%. His lowest, I think, his lowest all season. They've got a committee deal in the backfield. Is Duke Johnson, I would guess, is going to be pretty popular this week. Is that correct?
Not as much as I would have thought.
Okay.
It's 11% ownership we have him at DraftKings.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense, I guess, because he's really at the end of the day, he's only had one good game, But, obviously the matchup's really good for him.
Alex, are you buying on Duke Johnson this week? Obviously he kind of fit the profile of a guy you'd want on DraftKings in particular with the PPR upside and some touchdowns. What are you doing with him? Did you see him in a lot of your lineups?
I'm not crazy about him as of now. Let me just bring up some numbers here. He ran routes on about 3 out of 5 snaps last week, and he only had 1 rush attempt. So that's not a ton of volume, which is really the main thing I'm looking for. So even though he ended up having a huge game, I'm not sure that the potential is great on a weekly basis for him to have an explosive performance like that.
Does the fact that they might be trailing Atlanta again, and this is more of an eye testing, but they looked like they were gelling as a team for the first time all year. Even the way they celebrated Julio getting his touchdown together, I thought it kind of had that feel of a team who's going to be one of the second half ones to watch. Would the idea of Cleveland playing from behind it all make you favor Duke a little more?
I think it makes a difference, but they've been playing. They haven't had like huge leads all year, and he hasn't done a whole lot. So.
The Browns not known for their building big leads early in the game.
Yeah.
Any Nick Chubb interest then if you're not going to Duke?
I haven't looked at his price. Let me bring that up. So he's 5,500 on DraftKings. Big price jump. I have him as a C value. And I find that guys who don't catch a lot of passes don't have quite as much variance on a week-to-week basis. So that's another knock against him.
He has to score 2 touchdowns to hit big.
Yeah. I mean, if you do it against any team, it's an Atlanta team giving up rushing touchdowns on 5.6% of their attempts, which is pretty bad. I think Chubb's interesting.
Wait. Rushing touchdowns on 5.6% of their 5.6%. All right, my bad.
Yep. Yeah. Just overall attempts. But yeah, so I think to me, like that jumps out. I think the Atlanta defense is pretty weak. And I think Chubb is a pretty viable pivot. I'm a little more intrigued by the Mayfield Landry stack. And I think Duke could have a little more value. I get the logic there. One thing that jumps out on ownership, which surprises me, David Njoku projected to be one of the highest owned tight ends on the slate, despite the questionable tag right now at 15%. So that's a little high for Njoku, given that he's had 2 kind of busty weeks in a row. I like Njoku, but not if he's going to be highly owned. No thanks.
He's a guy that's been puzzling me because in my own model, I have him projecting on a weekly basis a lot lower than the sportsbook props. So, I mean, the props have been pretty solid every week. I think last week it was like 50 yards, which is pretty good for a tight end. I'm not really sure where they're getting this number, but I guess the potential is a lot higher than the performance so far this year.
Yeah, I agree. He's had a lot of good tight end matchups. Like last week, I think in particular was one that should have been good for him, and he just didn't get there. Just wasn't targeted the same as Duke Johnson. Alex, give me an under the radar spot that we haven't talked about that you're looking at this week.
Well, I'm trying to decide exactly how to ration out these contrarian picks, but I'll go with the one off the top of my head. I really like Theo Riddick this week. And the matchup versus Chicago isn't a good one, but I noticed that the Lions were playing. They're playing him along with another running back a significant part of the time. He ran a ton of routes with Tate gone. I think there's a lot of potential for him to get a lot of the short yardage routes, and he's only 1% projected ownership. So I think that. That will be my contrarian running back of the week once we get to that.
Interesting. Evan, what did you think about the Detroit offense for the first week without Golden Tate?
What did you think about him?
I thought it was going to be bad, and I thought it was really bad.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
10 sacks, 17 quarterback hits.
Yeah, no, it wasn't good. I mean, now they're getting Khalil Mack back for a matchup. I love the Bears defense here.
Yeah, they're the highest priced defense on FanDuel.
And DK, and I think it's worth it again this week.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I can't argue. I mean, and Dan Orlovsky, who played for the Lions for a long time, he's like, best boys with Matthew Stafford. Really good game film analyst. He's like, if they had Golden Tate, 4 of those sacks wouldn't have happened last week.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know, maybe that's a little aggressive, but I don't doubt what Dan Orlovsky says. He played for, Jim Bob Cooter and everything else. So he knows what he's talking about. But I like the Theo Riddick call. He should be out there a lot. They need to use him at slot receiver. They use TJ Jones too much. Like Matthew Stafford doesn't even throw to TJ Jones. Like just use Theo Riddick at slot receiver, just embrace it. But I like it. 8 targets last week. Came back. He played, I think, 40% of the snaps, I want to say. But it makes a lot of sense. You said he's minimum price?
He's 3,800 on DK, but yeah,
so just a little bit above. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, I think the defense could be a great play, and I think Riddick makes a lot of sense too to attack this defense because they're going to have to do something. But I think it's going to be another bad day for Matt Stafford, and you don't want a guy who's getting sacked a lot and has a no line. It's allowing a lot of sacks versus a defense who's getting back to full health and needs a divisional win, I think, too.
Yeah, I said 39% of the snaps. That's not correct. I think it was 39 total snaps, I want to say. He was out there a lot last week, Theo Riddick was. And they used him in the slot actually sometimes on third downs. So hopefully they will do that more this week.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I like the Bears defense, and I think Riddick also is a pretty savvy play too. No ownership on him, but there is actually 10% ownership projected for Kerryon Johnson, which is a bit of a surprise. But Kerryon's role has been greatly affected by Riddick's return. Any interest in your boy Trubisky, Alex, on the other side, getting a nice matchup versus the Detroit defense, who not very good at anything?
Yeah, I think that Trubisky could have another 6 touchdown day. Quote that.
Take that to the bank. Alex said it. Clip it, Brett.
More realistically, I mean, Detroit's defense gives up a lot of points, and I like going with Trubisky, pairing him with Cohen and Gabriel. I think that could be a pretty good stack. And as you saw with the 6 touchdown game, they can just they did that without any kind of opposition from Tampa Bay. So I think that you could just go all in on the Chicago side here, and it could pay off.
So I just started chuckling a little bit because somebody in the YouTube chat had the most esoteric comment ever. Is it me or does Evan look like a young Ned Beatty? Out of all the people to reference, that's an outrageous one. I don't see it, Evan.
Outrageous. All right. I think it's because I got this weird hair thing going on today.
Look, I think it's a compliment though, because Ned Beatty was pretty sexy in his day. He was killing it.
That's true. I know. He was. Wasn't he? What was that movie that he was really good in? He's like a gangster.
Dick Tracy.
Yes.
That was my favorite movies of childhood. But yeah, he was notorious. Man about town with the ladies in Hollywood. So take that as a compliment. That's nice.
I will.
Let's talk about another chalky running back play who I think we need to address. He's projected for a ton of ownership. I think one of the highest owned running backs on the slate besides Todd Gurley. Dion Lewis in this matchup versus New England. People are having that 27% ownership on DK. Also a lot of ownership for Corey Davis, but this game overall isn't highly owned besides those guys. Alex, how do you feel about Lewis and Davis in this matchup where theoretically they should need to put up points?
I think Lewis is an excellent price on both sides. We saw he got a huge role in the last game after the bye. So I think that you can expect him to be the lead back. I'm not sure he'll get quite as much of the share of snaps with Derrick Henry as he did in the last game. And I think that he's a great cash play. But in GPPs, I think the ownership being the second highest on the slate is a warning flag for me.
Yeah.
Because I find that this kind of middle tier running back, there's a lot of variance and volatility, especially with the timeshare with Derrick Henry. And that can be great if you have a low-owned guy. But when the guy's approaching like 30-40% ownership, that becomes a lot less appealing to having a GPP.
What do you think, Evan, about the Lewis's prospects?
Yeah, so I think that's just perfectly put. I think that it's very much within his range of outcomes to get like a 17-touch, 73-yard game, where he runs the ball, 13 times and he catches 4 passes and he ends up, with no touchdowns and, you get like, I don't know, 10.3 points out of him, which should be fine. I think he's a lot cash play. Like I really do, especially on DK. And I'm thinking about playing him in cash on FanDuel. So this is my little humble brag moment, right? So I used 4 Steelers in the Thursday night game, and I'm starting off the week with a lot of touchdowns on the Monday slate, So I'm debating on FanDuel between Dion Lewis and Aaron Jones. I still want to be like a little contrarian because I'm just putting this one lineup in like every tournament or I put it in like every Thursday through Monday. So I definitely don't want to be like too chalky, But I'm debating between Dion Lewis and Aaron Jones.
What do you think, Alex?
And the price difference is, so Dion Lewis is $5,800 and Aaron Jones is $6,500.
Well, where would you do that spot?
And I would probably use it to raise up like Buccaneers defense to, I don't know, maybe like Packers defense or something like against Osweiler.
Alex, what would you do? Help Evan win money.
I have Lewis as a slightly better value on FanDuel. Mm-hmm. But I think Jones is a great play as well on both sides. He's popping up on my crunches a ton. Even higher than Lewis on DraftKings with the $400 price difference. I was kind of expecting Aaron Jones wouldn't get much of the passing work. I thought Jamal Williams would get most of that. But the number of routes that Aaron Jones ran was an auspicious sign. So I think you can treat him like a lead back this week. And I think he's a great value at the 5K price tag versus in a matchup that they should probably win pretty handily.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there you go. So now Evan knows what to do. So now you're gonna win. You got the top DFS player in the world giving you advice. How could you top that? No way. No one else has that in that tournament.
Can't.
Let's talk about another.
Like asking Warren Buffett, what should I do with this next $100? You know?
And now you'll have billions. That's all we ever wanted for you, Evan, was to make money off of Alex's picks. Now that's what you're here for, just to make money off of Alex's picks. Let's talk about another under the radar spot where a lot of people asking about Peyton Barber for some reason this week. So, but I want to talk about the spot anyway, because for some reason I'm now the person who has to bring up Alex Smith without solicitation. But Washington heading into Tampa Bay, go at Washington, a terrible offensive line going against a terrible Tampa defensive line and just defense in general. Tampa Bay projected for 27 points on their side. Fitzpatrick has some ownership on him. Mike Evans has a little bit as well. Everything else here, for the most part, underowned, besides people apparently chasing Maurice Harris, who is currently going to have to see what happens with Jamison Crowder and his questionable tag. But Alex, any love for your guy, Alex Smith, or this game in general?
So I was totally off it, but 20 minutes before we went on, I think Jamison Crowder was ruled out for the week.
Oh, was he? Okay.
I noticed Maurice Harris has 10% ownership on DraftKings projected, which is kind of shocking given that, a few weeks ago he was at like 0.5% or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I think he is a decent value. Jordan Reed has kind of a decent price tag. I mean, these aren't guys that are going to make the top of my list by any means. And Alex Smith did show up on some of my initial crunches as the 8th best quarterback of the 20. So,
oh, man.
I mean, why not, right?
He got 20 points last week. I had a little bit of Alex Smith exposure. I unfortunately didn't have him stacked with Harris. I had him with Josh Doxson, who I wrote in my column this week, which not as good as Evans, but it is a column that exists on the internet, the Slant and Go. And Josh Doxson looked the best Josh Doxson I've ever seen. Maurice Harris looked actually kind of good. Again, versus a bad Atlanta defense, but this is a bad Tampa Bay defense. So, why not? Why not Alex Smith?
What does it say about Josh Doxson that this is the best he ever looked, and he had 31 yards. He had 31 yards.
But he caught a touchdown, and it was a great catch.
He actually had a big play called back too.
He looked good.
I'm not hating, but he did have 31 yards.
Hey, look, by Josh Doxson standards, that's elite.
I know. I'm playing him in some spots, like in season long in season long this week. But Alex Smith, man, he has not had one good week where he was good in fantasy so far this year. The right side and the left side of his offensive line are gone. And then I've been thinking about playing the Buccaneers defense. Like, they're really cheap, and we saw what happened last year when the Redskins lost their offensive line. Like, they went long stretches where they just could not function offensively, and that was with a better quarterback, Kirk Cousins, than they have now with Alex Smith. So I guess it comes down to, how much really do you weight matchup? We know that matchup, matters, but how much does it really matter? Because I'm worried about the Redskins scoring 13 points in this game.
Yeah, no, it's very possible there. My concern is also that, if Tampa Bay doesn't jump on Washington, it's just could be a running day for Peterson, which would be beneficial for Peterson coming off of a week where he disappointed as a chalkier play than we had projected even. I don't know. I think it's interesting here. Any Tampa Bay exposure for you, Alex, and Peyton Barber? Because people really talking about Peyton Barber.
I think Tampa Bay's passing offense is a great play this week, especially of course, Mike Evans. I think the Fitzpatrick-Evans combo is probably the one you want to go with. Mm-hmm. I think they have a lot of potential. As we saw the first few weeks of the season. So I think the prices are a little bit lower on those guys than some of the other teams. So I really like going with Tampa's passing attack.
I've been on Deshaun Jackson too much. And Evan, can you give me a reason why to not go to Deshaun Jackson in a matchup? He's never played Washington since leaving their team either. So revenge game in the NFL. Any Deshaun thoughts?
No, you know what you're getting into. You're probably getting 4 to 6 targets, and he's going to be boom or bust, and that's it. That's all I got. I love him. I love Deshaun Jackson, but that's the extent of the analysis.
That's tough but fair. I would not go back. Go ahead.
If he either goes boom or bust, we'll have to cut out this this clip and show it.
You know what you're getting.
Right, yeah.
That's it.
Well, don't show it if he gets like 4 catches for 79 yards and he's like,
one guy I would not want to chase this week. I just would throw it out there now. OJ Howard, at his price being up. He had 2 touchdowns last week, but they were the easiest possible touchdowns you could have in the red zone. And sure, that could happen again. But I think at his price, if he's not being chased ownership-wise yet, but I think people might be tempted there. I would be a little leery of OJ. I would be a little leery of anybody OJ's, but OJ Howard this week in particular. Let's go to the finish line here, start working towards it. Alex, who would be your fade of the week this week?
Come back to me in a second. I need to look at this ownership real quick.
Okay. Evan, who would be your fade of the week?
Yeah, I'm going to go Michael Thomas, I think, which I hate. I mean, I hate fading, studs. I did fade. I did get a fade right earlier in the year when we were like when everybody wanted Julio Jones and he was under 100 yards but I think that I will go with Michael Thomas here again. The Saints passing him just not quite as good on the road historically, and his ownership is going to be up. I think. What's your ownership projection for him?
For Michael Thomas, he's projected for hold on, where did New Orleans go? 24% right now.
Okay, jeez, that's a lot. That's a lot. A quarter of the field is going to be playing him.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
That's a fade.
That actually was going to be my pick too. I just think it makes sense to me that it would be more of a running game for New Orleans and or even a Traquan Smith game at 4% ownership. I mean, not that Thomas is going to have a bad day and be forgotten in the offense, but I think at that price coming off a big game, you can look other ways. But since Evan picked him, I'll go with I like Dion Lewis enough. I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers in that Raiders game. I think it's just the Melvin Gordon game. Rivers, we have projected for 12% ownership, which would be pretty high at quarterback. I think people also think Keenan Allen's back to full Keenan Allen form. And I think he looked good, but I don't know if he's going to be as needed to be relied on in this matchup here. So Melvin Gordon, ride or die.
That's been Keenan Allen's problem. It's not like his level of play or anything else. They're bottom 5 in the NFL in pass attempts. Mm-hmm. And they have like all these easy wins. Like they beat like Tennessee and Buffalo and just all these awful teams. And guess what? Now they're playing another awful team. So and people complain all the time about Keenan Allen, like in season long, like this dude's a bust. Well, you got to like understand why, and then you can understand, and it's because they have all these really, really easy wins, and this one's going to be another smooth sailing win. It looks like on paper, like you mentioned, Spags.
Yeah, I think to me, like Melvin Gordon is, I think the one piece you can trust here, but it would easily be, I think you'd easily see Terrell Williams get the touchdown catches or Mike Williams, and there's just so many ways you could beat these Raiders where I wouldn't want to trust that Keenan Allen Rivers duo, but yeah. Alex, what about now? Fade of the week.
Got it. So my fade of the week is Kareem Hunt. He's projected to be one of the highest owned players of the week. His price tag went up 800. And if you go back to week 5, his price is up 2,700 since then. So he's been having really great performances, 33, 19, 37, 32. I mean, you have to go back to week 2 before he didn't have a killer week. But I think when you put him in the same tier as Gurley, Kamara, and other guys like Michael Thomas, I think that the price is just too high, and I'm out at that point. If he does it again, then I mean that's great for everyone who picked him. But
is his ownership projections real high? See, I love him, man. The spot is unbelievable.
Yeah, he's also at 24% right now. So yeah, pretty happy.
Jeez, man, you're depressing me. I mean, the reasoning here is literally just variance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the price tag is the reason. He's 9K on FanDuel. I mean, he's like the 3rd most expensive guy on the slate on both sites.
Yeah.
4th on DraftKings. So I mean, he's just not as consistent a fantasy producer as guys like Gurley. So if I had to pivot from anyone, just pivot up to Gurley for 900 more. I mean, everyone knows Gurley is like the top fantasy stud, and when it's only 900 more and only 5% more ownership, I think that creates the incentive to really go for him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. How about a contrarian QB pick, Alex?
Well, we already talked about Alex Smith. So
I'm glad you're back on his team. We missed you on there last week. It was hard. It's hard being alone on Alex Smith Island.
Alex, 13.8 point Smith.
The funny thing is, like, the only week I wasn't on him, he actually went out and did.
I tried to sell you. You were like, he's hurt me too many times. You wouldn't take him back. It was a Taylor Swift song for you.
I was on like the Cam McCaffrey stack every week until they played Baltimore, and then that's when it went off.
Ugh, that hurts.
So, this isn't seeming very contrarian to me based on intuition, but our ownership projections have Matt Ryan at 5.8%. I think he's one of the top players of quarterbacks of the week. So I think I'm going to have him a lot more than that.
That makes sense to me. Evan, who would you pick as a contrarian QB?
So two stand out to me. Andrew Luck at home against the Jags and Aaron Rodgers at home against Miami. Now, Aaron Rodgers doesn't seem like he should be a contrarian pick, but I just haven't heard a lot of buzz about him. What are the ownership projections here on Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers?
Rodgers we have right now at 11%.
Okay.
And Luck we have at where are you at? You're 2.6% for Andrew Luck.
Wow.
People still respecting the Jags.
Yeah. They're without AJ Bouye, their number 2 cornerback. They're without Telvin Smith, one of the most athletic linebackers in football, a guy who, will match up with dudes and tight ends. This is the healthiest that the Colts have been all season. They opened the season with a bunch of offensive line injuries. They were missing T.Y. Hilton for a bunch. They were missing Jack Doyle for a bunch. Ryan Grant, decent low possession receiver who catches everything, not a difference maker, but he catches everything and he moves the chains. He's been out a bunch. I mean, all these guys are back, and they're, man, I think they're going to roll offensively. They don't give up sacks. They have like top 3 run blocking metrics. Marlon Mack is rolling. Wow. That's interesting. I think Andrew Luck at 2.8% is an incredible tournament play.
Yeah, not a bad team total there either. I think this could be one of those things like Seattle was in the past where people still respect the defense too much, but they're not having the year they have. They're not generating turnovers really at all, which has been an issue for Jacksonville like they did last year. For me, I'm going to go Andy Dalton as my contrarian QB pick. I believe in Tyler Boyd. I've been riding Tyler Boyd pretty much every week. And I think even though I think this might be to the benefit of Andy Dalton. I think the Saints can stop the run game enough through traditional routes. They might have to get Joe Mixon or Bernard, if he's healthy enough to be in the lineup and running around, touches in space more. And I think obviously that's going to benefit Andy Dalton if they just have to throw short little dink and dunk things to Mixon or Bernard. And John Ross, he can still run a deep route as well as anybody. Saints not good defending the deep ball either. So it's a nice spot for me at Andy Dalton at 2.5% ownership in a game which could shoot out. Contrarian running back pick. Evan, you go first.
Well, I just wanted to mention with the Andy Dalton one, he throws 3 touchdowns, 2 go to Tyler Boyd. That's an awesome stack,
Yeah, I agree.
And that seems so easy that so possible that it could happen. It's just DFS is so easy.
That's what people always say. DFS the easiest thing around.
If you're not entering 150 lineups, you should do that because you win every time.
You just have to max enter. That way you cover every player. That's what you do, Alex, right?
Yeah, let's not talk about what happens when you get your picks wrong when you enter 150 lineups, because those weeks are not good.
We need a second mortgage those weeks.
Yeah, right. Contrarian running back pick. Oh man, you want to go first, Alex?
Yeah, I'm going to just reiterate my theoretic pick. I don't think I could do any better than that because he's 1%. I just think he's getting a lot of work along with other running backs. So I think his workload is going to be higher than we've seen it all season so far.
That's fair.
I will go with, David Johnson. What was your ownership projection again on David Johnson?
David Johnson we have at a little under 10%.
That's ridiculous. He's literally facing the team giving up the most fantasy points in the league and receiving yards in the league to running backs.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to go a little bit more contrarian, how about Kenyon Drake against Green Bay? Just hoping that Adam Gase wakes up and realizes that he's the best back on the team. They're going to need to score points in this game to have any prayer. I think that the Dolphins are going to have a really big, or the Packers are going to have a really big offensive day. But Kenyon Drake, I mean, they essentially benched him last week. He's given up a sack in pass protection in back-to-back games. And last week, he finishes with 7 touches. But they're going to need to score. This reminds me of, you remember, did you play fantasy football back in the day when the Chiefs had Thomas Jones and Jamal Charles on the same team?
I remember that in season long, yeah.
Yeah. And, man, it was just so frustrating because it's just a very similar situation with Frank Gore and Thomas Jones and Kenyon Drake and Jamal Charles and Chris Raybon, one of my favorite fantasy football analysts. He actually compared Jamal Charles to Kenyon Drake before the season, and there are so many similarities. Like they've been kind of like stereotyped or typecast as like rotational committee backs. They were both drafted in the 3rd round. Their combine metrics are kind of similar. Entering the season, they had very similar yards per carry averages. Just a lot of similarities between those two situations, and it's kind of frustrating. But hopefully, Adam Gase will just wake up this week, and that's what I'm basing my tout on: the coach waking up.
Yeah, you mean you shouldn't give Frank Gore 20 touches in 2018? That's probably not a profitable situation. I don't get it, but I agree. And hopefully Kenyon Drake has those years that Jamal Charles had once people finally figured out how to use him before he did break down. My contrarian RB pick, just because I think he's too low owned and too cheap, and he's at full health for the first time and nobody's talking about him, Leonard Fournette, I think is an interesting play to me. Hamstring injury is usually not something I want to screw around with, but I think he's been practicing in full. I think that's enough for me to bank on him. The Jags need him now more than ever. Their season just in shambles. And, Indianapolis is going to put up points. Hopefully they don't put up enough points where the game gets away. But I think Fournette's in a pretty good spot at that price. And I think him and David Johnson, 2 guys under 7K on DraftKings. And a lot of people are going to go to those 8K plus guys. Could be nice moves there. Contrarian wide receiver pick, Alex, to close us out.
I'm going to go with Quincy Enunwa. Going against Buffalo, it's not a great matchup, but I expect the Jets to have possession more often than a normal game because Buffalo is so bad at offense. I think that's going to lead to a lot of passing attempts, or a decent amount. Josh McCown is slated to start. I think that's a slight bump as far as passing over Sam Darnold, maybe just a slight bump. But Enunwa had a promising start to the season. Last game they played, he played almost all the snaps, and Robbie Anderson is doubtful, so I expect him to get a little bit more of a target share with the replacement for Robbie Anderson. So putting all that together, I think that he's a pretty decent play this week.
If Anderson were ruled in unexpectedly, would that make a play for you? Because he and McCown had some pretty great chemistry last year.
I'd probably still be on Enunwa, to be honest.
Okay, that's fair. Evan, how about you, contrarian wide receiver?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys about 2 guys before we go.
Go for it.
I'm trying to come up with a contrarian receiver right now. Shoot, man, I don't know. Oakland, no. Chargers, no. Chiefs. I mean, if no Sammy Watkins, maybe Chris Conley, maybe. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald, is he fairly contrarian? I don't know.
Yeah, under 5%. I'll out.
He's my guy. All right, so I wanted to ask you guys about 2 guys, okay? Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Corey Davis. Just any general thoughts on them for week 10?
What do you think, Alex?
I have Valdes-Scantling as being pretty far behind Adams and Cobb as far as targets. He's been really productive in the targets he does get, but I noticed that he was one of the higher owned wide receivers on our ownership projections. So I'm probably not going to have him unless I unless my analysis changes at some point before tomorrow.
Yeah, I think Valdes-Scantling and Corey Davis both look pretty interesting to me. I don't love the ownership on Corey Davis. I think people are just, people are chasing him a little bit because they've seen his targets and all that, and it's a matchup versus New England. Actually, I think this New England game is going to be a little more low scoring than people realize. That Titans D is really good in the red zone. I think they're just going to stifle the Patriots enough to keep it low. So I'm not crazy about either passing game. A little bit of interest in Josh Gordon there.
Yeah, I wanted to mention Josh Gordon. I wanted to bring him up too. Yeah,
he's actually, and he was a B. I actually meant to ask that of Alex, but we kind of skimmed past it. But Alex has Josh Gordon and Edelman as Bs in points and value in his rankings. And I think both guys are pretty interesting in this matchup. One of them, I think, should have a good day. And the matchup too for Gordon is pretty good, going against Bill Belichick's favorite guy to bench during the Super Bowls. It'd be nice. And my contrarian wide receiver pick to close it out. I'm going to go Traquan Smith because I'm in on the Michael Thomas fade. And Traquan can put up a ton of yards, I think, in this matchup. Just get open deep and run. And that's my hope. Not a highly targeted guy, but, with Dez Bryant coming in and out so fast, maybe there's something to prove here for him to show that he can be that guy. You don't need to bring in somebody else to supplement him. So go Traquan, go for me. Any final thoughts for the week? Evan, before I'll turn it over to you, Alex.
No. Thanks so much for having me back, though. Good show, and I look forward to closing out the season strong. We're a little bit over halfway done. Osmo, do you play much in the playoffs, in the NFL playoffs?
Absolutely. I'm expecting some really big contests this year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we talked about the playoffs a little bit last year. I forgot about that.
Yeah. I think we had a pretty crazy night at one of those playoff games downtown Chicago. That was pretty fun. Yeah. Maybe we can switch some more showdown because I think those games are going to be pretty big this year.
And the Bears will be in there, so you guys get Chicago weird. Really support the team. I think that I'm down to ride for as long as we want to keep doing these shows. So I'm into that. Alex, parting words for everybody before we close off for the week.
Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks Evan for again being our special guest. You're the master at NFL, so it's great having you on here. Thanks Chris, and thanks Josh for producing the show behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's great having Evan back with those Ned Beatty matinee star good looks. Have definitely given me a boost on this Saturday. No, it's great having Evan back, and honestly, this show is so much fun to do. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to throw us a like before you leave. Use that promo code Contrarian on Osmo.com for 1 week free of all the things that Alex talked about today. His rankings, his ownership projections, things which will give you a quantifiable benefit over all the competitors you're going to face this weekend in fantasy football tournaments across the DFS industry. So go do that now. Promo code Contrarian on Osmo.com, and we will see you guys again soon. So good luck.